Uhuru. Uhuru, and welcome to the monthly webinar of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the mass organization of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people formed by and working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. We organize in the white community to build principled solidarity with the struggle of Africans inside the U.S. and around the world for national liberation, self-determination, and social and economic justice. Our work revolves around reparations to African people, recognizing that we as white people sit on a pedestal of 600 years of oppression, slavery, genocide, and colonialism that built the United States as well as Canada, Europe, New Zealand, Israel, South Africa, and yes, Australia, at African and indigenous people's expense. We benefit from this reality here and today, and it is our responsibility to rectify our bloody relationship to the oppressed peoples of the world through reparations and material solidarity with Black power. My name is Jamie Simpson, and I am a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and I am truly honored and excited to be here at the magnificent St. Petersburg, Florida Uhuru House, joined by comrades from the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and more. But before I introduce our guest tonight, I do want to salute the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru. Without Chairman Omali Yeshitela, whose strategy and vision of African internationalism, we wouldn't see this growing and building that we're seeing of the African People's Socialist Party all over the world, with the uncompromising goal of total liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere. We want to especially salute the chairman for the amazing Sunday studies he is leading of his brand new political report to the upcoming 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. The chairman read from the 9th chapter, which is on the theory of African internationalism, as he originally explained in the book An Uneasy Equilibrium, the African Revolution versus Parasitic Capitalism. We also want to salute Deputy Chair Ona Zane Yeshitela. Deputy Chair. We want to salute you, Deputy Chair, for leading the creation of dual power in the hands of African workers throughout the world, the visionary leader behind the economic work of the party that is building the foundation of a liberated, socialist, anti-colonial, African working class controlled Black power economy. This is most sharply exemplified today by the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis, a magnificent political economic project wherein DC Ona went to St. Louis for just a week and wound up staying for over a year, leading the leading the process of renovating a 9,000 square foot abandoned building into a beautiful Uhuru House Black Community Center in the heart of the impoverished African working class neighborhood on West Florissant Avenue. This project has been funded entirely by the support of the people, including Africans investing in their own future and white people paying reparations to the African liberation struggle. So, Uhuru, we also want to salute the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Chairwoman Penny Hess, who has led us and continues to lead the African People's Solidarity Committee under the party's leadership since the chairman formed the African People's Solidarity Committee, or APSC, in 1976 as the only principled way for white people to join in real solidarity with the anti-colonial African struggle. Chairwoman Penny also leads the Black Power Blueprint Reparations Funding Campaign, which has coordinated weekly webinars for the past 7 months, which many of you have watched and contributed to. And because of you and your support of these weekly webinars and the amazing Black Power Blueprint Project, Phase 2 was able to go into effect with the demolition of 2 condemned buildings across the street from the new Uhuru House, and to make room for the founding of a One Africa, One Nation marketplace, which will stimulate Black community commerce for and between African people. And a 50-foot flagpole was also raised to prepare for the unveiling of the tremendous red, black, and green flag to fly high over the African colony in St. Louis. And we are now in a new stage of the fundraising with a new website called blackpowerblueprint.org. Please remember that. Uhuru. And tonight, I do want to announce that we have a special goal of $1,500 towards the Black Power Blueprint project tonight. And we are already $81 of the way there. Thank you to our amazing supporters out there. We will thank you by name momentarily. So that brings us to, if I'm not mistaken, $1,419 to go in reparations. But before we go any further, I want to introduce my co-host, leading member of the African People Solidarity Committee and Uhuru Solidarity Movement's National Secretary, Jackson Hollingsworth.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Thank you, Jamie. Uhuru, everyone. As Jamie said, I am Jackson Hollingsworth, and I am your co-host, Uhuru.
Uhuru. It's awesome to have you here, Jackson, as always. And I'd also like to welcome our co-host, Chair Jesse Neville, the National Chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Uhuru, Jesse.
Uhuru. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here, comrade. So this is a very special night. And first of all, it is special because we have the incredible honor to have on the line with us tonight the Secretary General of the African People's Socialist Party, a brilliant revolutionary leader and organizer who is also internationally known for his witty, incisive, and moving online commentaries on everything ranging from popular culture to the police murders of African people. Please join in welcoming the African People's Socialist Party Secretary General, Gazi Kodzo. Uhuru. I also want to welcome the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee and host of the weekly show. I want to mention the Crisis Report, who will be speaking to us later tonight about how white people can join the movement for white reparations to African people by supporting the Uhuru movement's incredible Black Power Blueprint project. And I do believe I just entirely took over your line, Comrade Jackson. I'm sorry about that.
You gave the info needed.
Uhuru Chairwoman Penny. So it is also my honor to introduce our special guest tonight, joining us all the way from Perth, Australia, where it is bright and early tomorrow morning as we speak, an organizer with the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, Comrade George. Uhuru. George joined the Uhuru Solidarity Movement last month and has enthusiastically taken on the work of building the first ever day of reparations to African people to be held in Perth in November of this year. Yes, let's give that another round. All right. This is an Australian comrade with us on the line who stands in profound solidarity with African and Indigenous struggle for liberation and reparations. From Australia to Africa to St. Louis. Again, please welcome Comrade George. So Uhuru, before we begin and we get into our special interviews tonight, I do want to turn it over to Uhuru Solidarity Movement Chair Jesse Neville, who will be giving us a political overview on why we are holding this webinar tonight. Jesse is going to give us a snapshot of the colonial history of Australia and why we make this statement: white Australians owe reparations.
Yes.
Uhuru, Jesse.
Uhuru. Uhuru, everybody. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you to everybody, Chairwoman Penny, Comrade Jackson, and everybody, Secretary General Gazi Kodzo, and George from Australia, who's going to be joining us a little bit later. I'm very excited about this program tonight. I'm very excited that we're going to raise $1,500 for the Black Power Blueprint, and I know that we've already raised $81, so before we even get into the program, just go ahead, go to blackpowerblueprint.org and start donating, start contributing reparations towards this amazing revolutionary project that's being built in St. Louis that has ramifications that is literally reaching people in Australia. That's how big this is. That's how big the Uhuru movement under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party is. So we're having a show right now where one of our guests is literally in tomorrow morning. That's how on the other side of the earth to join us, and the farthest from here that you can get, basically. So we really appreciate that, and just the historic significance of the growth of the African People's Socialist Party and the influence of Chairman Omali Yeshitela is being evidenced by this webinar tonight. So salute to the chairman and deputy chair and all of the leaders of the African People's Socialist Party. And so we are here from the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. As has been stated, we're the organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, and we are given the assignment from the party to go organize other white people like ourselves to stand in solidarity with the struggle of African people fighting for liberation, fighting to take back control of the resources that we as white people have stolen from them for the last 600 years, and as well as the indigenous people of this land, whose land we sit on as we speak, that we stole from them and committed genocide against the native people to build our wealth and our prosperity at their expense. And our work in USM is under the theory of African internationalism. So all of the views that you're going to hear from us white people tonight are not from the minds of white people. We are embracing the worldview of the African working class as developed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, called African internationalism. And African internationalism explains that this system that we live under, capitalism, was built off of the enslavement of African people, genocide against the native people, and colonialism all over the world. And as the chairman has shown, prior to the emergence of capitalism, prior to the assault on Africa and indigenous peoples and colonialism, white people lived in feudalism, we lived in poverty, we were dying of the plague in Europe. Europe, even as a consolidated thing, did not exist. And the way we rescued ourselves out of feudalism was by leaving Europe and going to this country, going to Africa, going to South America, and going to Australia, and committing genocide and stealing this land. And the chairman says he talks about primitive accumulation of capital, that this process we're talking about, slavery, genocide, colonialism, that's the primitive accumulation of capital that gave birth to the capitalist system. And in his political report to the 7th Congress, Chairman Omali Yeshitela writes, what Marx termed primitive accumulation was in fact the deadly European assault on Africa, North and South America, and Australia, and the extinction and the near decimation of whole peoples. It was the brutal rape of much of Asia and the Middle East, and the numerous internecine wars between European states battling for control of the slave trade and the colonies. It was the resultant growth in wealth that overturned European feudalism and ushered forth capitalism and the European nation. So a lot of the time, we talk about the United States and even Israel as these obvious examples of colonial settler states. But amongst a lot of white people, Australia is let off the hook and is exceptionalized. And we don't even talk about it at all. Or if we do, it's just like, oh, yeah, it's just another white country, like Australians are from Australia. But Australia, like the United States, like Israel, is a white colonial settler state that white people created through the genocide against the native people who are known as the Aboriginal people, who historically have identified as black or African, and who, as we're going to talk about in a minute, even had a branch of the Marcus Garvey movement in the 1920s and a Black Power movement in the 1960s and early 1970s. So just a quick history. There's a lot that could be said about this, and hopefully we'll have more programs and studies in the future to go over this. But really quickly, 1788 was when the British arrived at what later came to be known as Australia and initiated the genocide against the Aboriginal people. The initial invasion of that land was for the British to create a prison colony to basically put prisoners into those lands to do prison labor, the prison labor was basically to colonize that land for Britain and to kill the indigenous people and start farming land or whatever. So they often use this myth that the reason why Britain did that is because they ran out of room for prisoners in Britain, and that's why they had to create a prison colony. But there was actually a colonial strategy to it in sending these prisoners that were basically about to finish up their sentence by colonizing the land of Australia. So that was the beginning, and immediately, as everywhere else, the British white people committed genocide, started spreading smallpox disease and other diseases that the Aboriginal people had never encountered before, just like here, just like on this land, and also seized the land and the water resources, started killing off all the animals that were native to that land, and settlers raped Aboriginal women, constantly every single day through this process, and there were over 250 massacres at least by white people against the Aboriginal people between the initial invasion in 1788 and the early 1920s. So this is what gave birth to this thing that's called Australia, where today the Aboriginal people still face horrific conditions, hellish conditions, no different from what African people who are colonized inside this country and indigenous people face in the United States today. And the resistance of the Aboriginal people was always as fierce and unrelenting as the violence that they were facing. And we don't have time to talk about this, but I encourage people to look into it. The Australian Frontier Wars, the Black War, these were courageous fightbacks of the Aboriginal people. But I do want to quickly mention, because we are under the leadership of the modern day Garvey movement, which will reach Australia as it did in the 1920s. And the branch of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which was the Garvey movement's organization that existed in Sydney, Australia in the 1920s, was the farthest one from the headquarters in Harlem. And when they had the International Convention of the Negro Peoples in New York, African people, the Aboriginal people, traveled from Australia to attend, as well as places throughout the world, to attend that convention. So that was an extremely powerful thing in history. And then in the 1960s and 1970s, there was a Black Power movement. The Aboriginal people who were inspired, they said, we read the autobiography of Malcolm X. We saw the Black Panthers. We saw Huey Newton. And they formed a Black Panther Party. And they said, our demand is Black power. And then white journalists would say, well, what do you mean by Black power because you're Aboriginal, like, what do you mean by Black power? And they say, we mean the same thing they mean in the United States when they say Black power. And they said, the Black power is the right of a people to self-determination, to control their own destinies as nations and people. So this is the legacy of the resistance of the Aboriginal people, and the genocide continues, the colonial violence continues, and the resistance continues. And it's so powerful and historic that now we have the opportunity to build a movement under the leadership of the Garvey movement of today, the African People's Socialist Party, to build white Australian solidarity with Black power. That is on the rise in Australia today, and we're going to talk more about that and actually hear from a spokesperson of that later on in this program. But that's just a quick overview I wanted to give on this thing that we call Australia and its bloody origins. And I am very excited to go into the rest of our program to hear from Secretary General Gazi Kodzo and Comrade George in Australia. So I will turn it right back over to our host.
Excellent. Uhuru. Thank you so much, Comrade Chair Jesse, for that really helpful overview of colonialism and imperial white terror in Australia. And please keep us updated if there are any donations or contributions.
We do have some donations.
Excellent.
First of all, really want to appreciate Chris Ward for $50. So Uhuru.
All right. Uhuru.
Anonymous, $20.
All right. Uhuru.
Zahir Smith, $6.
Okay. Uhuru.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anonymous was $25. Great.
All right, excellent.
KC Mackey, $30.
Uhuru, KC.
And Rose Latoul, $10.
Uhuru.
So we only have 1,379 to go, so let's do this.
On our way.
Uhuru.
Uhuru, we've done it before. We know we can do it tonight. And if you want to join the incredible comrades that Jackson just listed, you can go to blackpowerblueprint.org. Make your donation, and please share this video far and wide. We're broadcasting on Facebook and YouTube tonight, so you can help spread that like wildfire on the internet. And we're going to move now to a really critical section of our program tonight. We are so honored to be able to have an interview with Secretary General of the African People's Socialist Party, Comrade Gazi Kodzo. Uhuru, Secretary General Gazi. For those who are tuning in for the first time, could you tell us about yourself, how it was that, and how your work as the Secretary General of the African People's Socialist Party, and explain to our viewers what the goal is of the African People's Socialist Party and the African Socialist International?
First, Uhuru to all of my comrades and everyone that can see. Just want to first salute and appreciate our leadership and the founder of the African People's Socialist Party, and the founder and creator of African internationalism. The reason why we are all here and the reason why the liberation for African people is closer and closer every day. Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Uhuru, one Africa, one nation. Uhuru. So, my name, like was said before, is Gazi Kodzo. And because of the leadership and development and training of Chairman Amalia Shatella, I am here as the Secretary General of the African People's Socialist Party for the United Snakes of America. And I am 28 years old. I am an obvious homosexual, and I still have the ability to participate and lead in the revolution for African people worldwide, and that is because of African internationalism, which unites all African people, all oppressed people, and all people that want to unite in solidarity with the African liberation. So I just really want to salute and appreciate the work of Chairman Amali Shatella, and also appreciate and salute the work of Deputy Chair Ona Zanaya Shatella in this. That's why we're here in this amazing building that is part of the Black Power Blueprint. This is the Uhuru House, St. Louis. So for all y'all that say, where does the reparations go? Where does the donation go? It goes right here into a beacon of light of hope for the African nation, but specifically a beacon of light for the African poor and working class. The Uhuru House St. Louis is in one of the most deprived sectors of the Black community. Trust me, it is. Every time I call Domino's or Pizza Hut and I tell them where we at, they're like, that's too dangerous. And I'm like, really? Really? Because I think the white community is more dangerous. But anyways, that's another story, but not really. But so yeah, that's where we're at. That's what we're about. The African Socialist Party is the party of the African working class worldwide. And your next question was, what? Oh, so yeah, that's who I is. And your next question was, what is the goal of the African Socialist Party? And the goal of APSP is the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere under the leadership of the African working class, because the African working class have a material interest in revolution and is the most dynamic force in world society. Uhuru to that real quick. Can we get an Uhuru to that?
Yeah.
And as stated by Chairman Amalia Shatella, as he wrote on page 100 to 101 in the new political report of the Seventh Party Congress, the African internationalists, which is us, African members of the African Socialist Party, people who are part of our mass organizations, people who are volunteers, white people in solidarity. We are all African internationalists. And like Chairman says, African internationalism is not just a theory, it's a theory and an act. You have to actually participate in the revolution. You can't just be an African internationalist because you just mentally unite with it and you speak it. You have to participate in it. So if you're an African internationalist, you better be a member of something or a volunteer or be paying reparations or donations, because it's not just about uniting with the theory, but this theory is a theory that will change the world as we know it. So what is the goal of the African Socialist Party? As Chairman says in pages 100 to 101 in the new political report for the Seventh Party Congress, which is the most important event ever, and everybody needs to get there. We'll talk more about that later. But in his new political report that he just wrote this year, he stated the African internationalist demand for reparations is a response to the initial imperialist attack made on Africa and must be seen as a revolutionary demand. Any economic advancement or catch-up for Africa will require Africa's ability to wage revolutionary struggle within the U.S. and other centers of imperialist development rooted in than these, organizations that want to give shoes to Africa or want to give, things to filter the water in Africa and all of these things. No, reparations is not a Band-Aid. It's not charity. It's not something to make you feel good while you talk to your white friends while you're sipping a Merlot that, I'm really good. These are the little black person on the fridge. Yeah, I give them $1 a day. No. What reparations is, when reparations is given to the African People's Socialist Party through, organizations like the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and the African People's Solidarity Committee, those resources go to the liberation of Africa, okay? So because we don't want filters for our water. What we want to do is cease and stop the reasons why we need filtered water in Africa anyways, because, what is it? The first people were in Africa, right? So how many hundreds and thousands of years were we drinking clean water? Why we need filters now, right? You have to answer that question with your resources, right? You have to overturn that. And that's what reparations does. It overturns that. It stops these factories and the minings that are going on in Africa that is designed to loot Africa and doesn't give a damn about the people of Africa. That's why it dirties up the water. That's why it puts all kinds of chemicals into the system and the atmosphere and the ecosystem and the grounds where things cannot grow anymore. And African people have to walk, miles and miles and miles just to get clean water or water that can be filtered or anything like that. If your resources aren't going to overturning that, all you are doing is basically making yourself feel good. And all of those other, imperialist capitalist organizations, the majority of the money goes to the owners and things like that so they can fly on their jets or whatever and then come to Africa and hunt lions and stuff. You've heard the story. But anyways, back to this. So a revolutionary objective of the African Revolution must be to return to Africa the stolen value wrenched from Africa. You see how it overturns that? It puts the power back in the hands of the people. This is the revolutionary pursuit of reparations. This is the revolutionary pursuit of reparations. Because we've heard some people say, well, I pay reparations already. I give money to my black friend, and he pays his rent with it and all this other kind of stuff, which I guess is okay, kind of, sort of, not really. But, real reparations is for the liberation of African people, because all African people want to be free. And all African people have a material interest in being free under the leadership of the African working class. So we are oppressed no more. Chairman says we will do Australia, South Africa, and everywhere else we have, either directly or indirectly, created life for Europe and other exploiters at the expense of African development. Comrades, the African Socialist International is a practical, material manifestation of our philosophy of African internationalism. See, when I said African internationalism is not just, thought, but it is action as well, action. So we had to create African Socialist International. We have to create the ASI. It is the African People's Socialist Party writ large throughout the world. It is the living proof of the failure of imperialist white power to permanently separate Africans from our resources and our identity as a single people. The survival and the advancement and the empowerment and all of the amazing, magnificent things that the African People's Socialist Party does around the world, like Chairman says, it's living proof. We are living proof. This is living proof. Your donations are living proof. Your reparations are living proof. Your viewing of this is living proof. Your sharing of this video right now is living proof of the failure of imperialist white power to permanently separate Africans from our resources and our identity as a single people. And we understand means when he says that. What he means is he's saying the assassination of Malcolm X, the assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, the mass murders and genocide of African people, the dividing of Africa into 45 different countries, the destruction and underdevelopment of Africa and African people worldwide, gentrification, poisoning of our water, murdering of us, pushing us into prisons. The African People's Socialist Party, this movement and all its organizations and institutions are a sign, a living, breathing symbol that you have failed to squash the revolution. You have failed to squash the liberation front and movement of the African working class, of African people. So I just appreciate everybody that is watching right now. Please make sure to give reparations, to donate, to call your friends and family, and to organize them to give reparations as well. And let's continue this living, breathing symbol that the white imperialists have failed. All their bombs have failed. All their bullets have failed. All their torturing has failed. All their imprisonment has failed. And we are continuing to win every day. And I am so glad to be a part of that winning team. Uhuru.
Wow. Thank you for that incredible answer, Secretary General Gazi Kodzo of the African People's Socialist Party. It is such an honor to be able to speak with you live on the line from the Uhuru House there in St. Louis. Just amazing insight, quoting from Chairman Omali Yeshitela's political report to the 7th Congress, which indeed will be the most significant event in the world. Yep. So we'll have more information on how you can be a part of that later. But continuing the interview with, I'm sorry, did you have something you wanted to announce?
I just wanted to say
Yes, please, Secretary General.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say something else is that, because this political report, it's so profound in how we are talking today. And like Jesse stated, that African internationalism has reached all corners of the world. There's no place you can go without, African internationalism touching there, being right there, and it's spreading because people all around the world are looking for answers. And this is why we're having a comrade from Australia a part of this. And like Jesse said, it's the farthest place you can go from here and you still find African internationalism. And Jesse just laid out the resistance and fight and revolution and the oppression and genocide of what the settlers call Aboriginal people in Australia, and the total genocide and the oppression of the people there, of the African people there. And to know, just like it stated, that African People's Socialist Party, that this movement and everything like that is assigned to that white power entity there as well, that they have failed as well, and that African nationalism is coming for their butts right there in Australia. And there's just so many things that you could see of Australia, just like it was stated, of the things that were done to the people there that have been done to African people literally everywhere. There's this documentary called The Rabbit Fence, where they talk about how the settlers stole all of the, without a better term of use, the Aboriginal people's children, stole all of their children and pushed them into these concentration camps, what they called schools. And it was this program called Take the Aboriginal Out the Aborigine, where they would teach them English and teach them their religion and make them dress like white people, talk like white people. And if they ever showed any sign or symbol or language of anything of their indigenous background, they would be beat, they would be tortured. But this happened to African people everywhere. Chairman talks about African people in the islands and in Africa when they took our children, and if you were caught speaking English, they would put a dead goat's head on you. And then what they would do in Australia, though, with the children, after they reached a certain age of like being a teenager, what they would do is sell them off to white people, ugly, poor white people that would have really hard time marrying anyone else. They would sell these children to them to marry, to take the Aborigine out the Aboriginal. And it was just a whole generation gone, and just totally, totally disgusting. And you can see even when they would do different fairs, like something like a Six Flags or something like that on islands that were around Australia, to murder the indigenous people there, what they would do would have white people come from Europe in their Sunday's best and come like it was a fair. They would have cotton candy, they would have funnel cake, all of these kinds of things, and they would give them guns, the men guns, the women guns, the children guns, and they would go out into the fields and murder the indigenous people and take pictures with their dead bodies. It was a fun going thing, but that's no different than the white people that would do the same thing here in the United Snakes of America and take pictures by lynched bodies during Sunday picnics, and have postcards and be sending it out. It is colonialism is colonialism everywhere. But again, this movement, this Black Power blueprint, is a living, breathing entity to show that you have failed white power and you will continue to fail. And we are winning. We are winning. And this fight, this front, is for the ending of that, because it's happening still to this day. We're telling you horrific stories of the past, but they're horrific stories right now. Just like I told you about how they took the indigenous people's children of Australia back in the day. Well, guess what? I think it was like 2013 or 2012, they did the exact same thing, because they were trying to get the people off of the concentration camps, because they found out that underneath the concentration camps, it was rich in uranium and other rich materials that they wanted them off. So they stole all the children. They made up farce lies about how the children were being molested and all these other kinds of things, and took all the children and put them into foster care homes. And then 5 years later, miraculously, they realized, oh, there was actually no child molestation going on. Oh, we didn't know that all of the people, all of the psychologists and all those kind of people, most of them weren't even professionals. The ones that were professionals and the ones that weren't, guess what? They were all bought by the mining company that wanted the Aboriginal people off of the land in the first damn place. But guess what? Now the children have been in the system for 5 years, and they're not reversing it. So it's continuously happening to this day. They're pushing, the Aboriginal people of Australia into prisons every day, pushing drugs into their community, and like just fighting, they're putting their fist up, power for self-determination, for the end of imperialism, the end of colonialism. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you for that. We're talking to Secretary General Gazi Kodzo of the African People's Socialist Party, summing up colonialism in Australia, and the universality of colonialism. Really incisive responses, Secretary General. Unfortunately, we only have time for one more question. Let's see. So I'm going to go with the next one up.
Yes.
In the chairman Amalia Chatella's book, this was to the 6th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, An Uneasy Equilibrium. He has a brilliant and definitive chapter on the African national identity. In that chapter, Chairman talks about African people whose presence in various parts of the world predates the transatlantic slave trade, such as India or Australia, and how they are part of the African nation. Could you speak to the party's position on this matter, Secretary General Gazi Kodzo?
Great question. And just like you said, like the chairman writes in the chapter of the national question from the Uneasy Equilibrium, chairman states, first of all Black people forcibly transported to diverse parts of the world as part of the process giving rise to capitalism and the European nation are Africans. Period. Secondly, all Black people throughout the world are potentially part of the African nation, whether they were part of the forcible dispersal or whether their presence in other places predates the assault on Africa. Just a real, I just want to pause there, just a real Uhuru and appreciation of that, because African internationalism literally destroys all borders that were created by colonialism, borders that were defined, history happened, but then colonialism came and then redefined those borders, just separating us, and how chairman and African internationalism, the party, brings us all together as one people again, and as a powerful people, and a people that will never be oppressed again, and we will not let these colonial borders divide us ever again, or any borders divide us ever again, and come together as one Africa and one nation. And I just love the brilliance of this, of us uniting as one, of us seeing, the Africans in India as Africans, the Africans in Australia as Africans. And in one of these documentaries I saw, or in a lot of the documentaries you'll see about, like Jesse said, of the 1960s, of the Africans in Australia rising up and putting their fist up and saying Black power, Black power. They identify as Black, and in a lot of their theology, is this called theology? But in a lot of their historical stories and things like that, they talk about coming from the continent of Africa to Australia way back in time and stuff, in history and everything like that. So a lot of them are very informed that they are African and come from Africa. This includes Black people in Australia, India, and other places who are generally experience a sense of sameness associated with African Blackness and the oppression we share because of our Blackness. Under imperialist world domination, Blackness is universally perceived as justification of our oppression. 267, for those Africans forcefully dispersed from Africa, we are directly connected to each other by the parasitic capitalist world economy under whose weight we continue to groan in poverty and oppression at the economic foundation of the European nation. All our cultural expressions found everywhere we are dispersed. Music, dance, and other art forms, our traditions have their foundation in Africa. Beautiful. The chairman later elaborates on this point. The African nation then is a community of people whose core identity is based on historical ties to the equatorial continent of Black Africa, contributing to a common culture, history, and physiology. I think I'm saying that right. The African nation is also comprised of all those African people who have been forcibly dispersed to various places in the world through colonial slavery. Dispersed Africans were part of the process of the development of capitalism and the European nation, a process that requires our subjugation and national incoherence. Additionally, the African nation is comprised of many who experience a sense of sameness, a subjective connection to Africa, mainly because of skin color that helps to define their imperialist-inspired, impoverished, oppressed state of existence. In areas where the African presence goes back to earliest times, such as in Asia Pacific, other nationalities living in Africa who commit national suicide, becoming part of the African working class and abandoning all allegiances to a predatory colonial relationship of African people. He's talking about the Arabian people in North Africa. The truth, stated simply, is we are Africans, whatever else we may be called, because we say we are Africans and we feel like we are Africans. Africa is the national homeland of all Black people worldwide. It is the land to which the identity of the African nation is firmly and irreversibly affixed. Which the identity of the African nation is firmly and irreversibly affixed. Our historical connection to Africa represents the critical element of the material basis for African nationality. For although we have been forcibly dispersed by colonial slavery and related factors subsequent to the initial European attack on Africa, our current conditions of existence, both in Africa and abroad, are essentially defined by the consequences of our forced dispersal. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Secretary General Gazi Kodzo, thank you so much. And I think, do we have time for one more question, or we need to move on now?
We have a lot of donations.
Yes.
Wow. All right, well, let's hear from the people who have donated to the vision that Secretary General Gazi Kodzo just laid out.
Yes,
Uhuru, take a real stand of white solidarity with Black Power. James White, $50.
Uhuru.
Chair Jesse Neville, $25.
Uhuru,
Chair Jesse. Kara Locke, $25.
Uhuru, Kara.
Secretary General of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Allison Haney, $25. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Janice Kant, $50.
Uhuru.
Rose Roby, 10.
All right.
Rose Roby, $10. Johan Benningfield, $10. Frankie K, $10. Tama Gadini, $10. And Kristen Forthen, $25. So I believe that brings us to $1,129 remaining. Let's do this. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
I really appreciate everyone who took a stand.
Yes, we can do this. We can do this.
Almost a third of the way there.
So, Uhuru, Secretary General Gazi Kodzo is on the line with us. And right now, comrade, you are in St. Louis, building for the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And the 7th Congress is being hailed as the biggest event of African people fighting to liberate Africa since Marcus Garvey's International Convention of the Negro people in New York in the 1920s, as it was called, which was attended by Africans from around the world, including the so-called Aboriginal people, the indigenous people of Australia. Can you briefly speak to the 7th Congress and how this movement is continuing to rebuild the legacy of Marcus Garvey?
Uhuru. So, yes, we are having the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party here in St. Louis from October 6th through October 12th. You can go to apspcongress.org, and it is the most important event for African people, for oppressed people, for people that want to be in solidarity with African oppressed people, for the liberation to create a new world. It is the most important event for anyone that wants to be on the right side of the question. It's the most important event in the world for anyone with a heart, like for anyone that sees what's going on daily with the mass incarceration of African people, with the shootings. You just had a pig this pig woman that went into the wrong apartment and shot and killed this African man. And now the statement is saying, well, she said that the reason she killed him is because she made a demand on him and he didn't comply. So she shot and killed him in his own house. In his own house. And we know that she's going to get off with it. If you are tired of hearing the stories of the African children that are being abused physically, mentally, and spiritually in the school systems, if you feel anything about the mass genocides and colonial terrorism of the U.S. imperialist military, this is the event for you. This is the event that you want to be at, because this is the event that will forward a new world where there will no longer be an oppressor nation living at the expense of the oppressed nation. And I am just so honored and appreciative to be a part of this webinar. The Africans in Australia, I have like, I feel like white when I'm like, I have a special connection with them. But like when I was coming into political consciousness during the Mike Brown rebellions, during, the murder of Trayvon Martin in that trial. And I was looking at this documentary, and I believe it's called The First Generation or something like that, or One Generation or something like that. And it's a documentary about the Aboriginal people. And it just talks about the continual colonialism that they face, the continual colonial onslaught that they face, all for colonial gain, all for capitalist gain, all for stolen resources given to the white nation to wipe out the people. And if you know anything about Australia, like and they push them off that land. So it talks about that. And it talks about how they continuously knock them off. And during the Black Revolution of the 60s, and which ignited the revolution everywhere, the Aboriginal people were able to win a piece of land that I believe they call like the Freedom Land, which was like, if this is Australia, it was like this northern mid-northern sector right here that the Aboriginal people could live on freely in their own land, basically like a big concentration camp, until they found out that land was rich in uranium and other materials, and then they pushed them into these little dots, right? And then from pushing them to those dots, they found out, well, hey, we want the people that were the workers that we ship over here to have a place to live, so we're going to take over these little dots. And that's when they started stealing the children, all of these kinds of things. So they were just talking about this and how they force either you're going to be pushed into prison, or they're going to push you into society and you have to act white, talk white, be white, and unite with white nationalism of Australia. Same thing they do in Africa, same thing they do here. And they were interviewing this African Aboriginal Indigenous person in Australia and this older brother, and they were asking him what is his biggest fear. And he was talking about how the Aboriginal people have this connection with the land, and how they used to, as young people, send the young people out into the woods, into the land, to learn about the land, learn the different traits of it, and have a connection with the land. And he said, have a connection with the nature and a connection with their history and all of these things, and how that is so important to them. And his biggest fear is that whenever you see a Aboriginal person in Australia, when they open up their mouth, though, what you're going to hear is a white person. You're going to have somebody that's not connected to the land, not connected to the history, not connected to the culture, or the language, or any of those kinds of things. And it's going to be basically a black white nationalist, somebody that, everything in them is of the oppressor. And he said that was his biggest fear. And as an African watching another African in Australia saying that's his biggest fear, I realized right then and there that I'm his biggest fear, because at that time I had a colonial name. I don't know any, I only know English. Don't have any connection to Africa, my land. Of course I have a connection, it's our birthright, but that connection has been stolen from me. That everything in me basically has been scooped. Everything that was me, everything that was part of the African nation, about being African, was scooped out, and then all this other stuff was put in by this imperialist, colonialist education system, by this propaganda, imperialist propaganda and media machine. Everything is put into you, and it's not just put into you by some just random other nation, but by an alien, antagonistic nation, an enemy, by your enemy, and everything in you is just embodied you by your enemy. And I remember that night I had to find my African name. I couldn't go to sleep having this, colonial name. But through African internationalism, you find out that that can be overturned. And you find out that it's even deeper than that, but we can win and we are winning. And there's an organization out there that is forwarding the liberation of African people so that that man's biggest fear, that brother's biggest fear, will be no more for all of us. And that is why coming to this Congress is so important. That is why building a unity with the masses and the African People's Socialist Party is so important to end the days of colonialism that literally steals everything from us, everything, our land, our resources, our ability to work, our humanness, our ability to even have healthy relationships with our mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, neighbors, everything. Nothing cannot be touched by white imperialism, colonialism. Comrade Tachar just told me this story recently about in Tanzania, how they would take Africans and dig these holes and put the Africans' bodies in the holes, and the only thing that would be exposed above the ground was the heads, and white people would play sports of who could kick off the head of an African child faster and it go farther. Nothing was off bounds or is off bounds in this horrific system. And if you want to end that, one, you have to pay reparations. You have to pay reparations. You have to pay reparations to end that. To end that disgusting violence, to end that system of blood and of misery and of genocide, and to put it into the hands of the African working class, the vanguard that is forwarding the liberation to the end of those days, the end of the days of the oppressor, under the leadership of the working class, through African internationalism, by our amazing leader, the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. We are living in the crisis of imperialism, but this is a beautiful, historic time to be alive if you're on the right side of the question, being a part of this amazing work. And this all leads us to our 7th Party Congress, where Chairman is going to be laying out his political report, our political report, the political report of all oppressed people, of African people and all oppressed people and those that are in solidarity with us. This amazing political report that lays out the revolutionary history of the African liberation, ties and shows and exposes how the African Socialist Party is the continuation of the Marcus Garvey movement that said Africa for those, Africa for Africans, those abroad and at home. And the continuation of that and giving Black power to the hands of the African working class that will lead the revolution to end these days of genocide, end these days of misery, end these days of gentrification, of police state violence, of all of these things, of even the violence that happens against same-gender loving people, gender and sexuality non-conforming people. Just yesterday, Comrade Dia Kiese's close friend, who was a trans African woman, was shot and murdered recently, just yesterday. If you are tired of those kinds of horizontal violence happening, then you have to be a part of the African Revolution. You have to be part of the African People's Socialist Party, which end those days of that subjective horizontal violence, which is built and put into our systems, put into our communities by white power. Her death is on white power's hands. Her death is on white power's hands, because under the leadership of the African working class, under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, if white power wasn't continuously trying to chokehold our chairman, trying to isolate our chairman, trying to keep the masses away from our chairman, that African trans woman would never be dead. She would never be dead. She would never be dead. African people would not be, hopped up on the drugs and fighting each other over shoes and drugs and scrimmaging over resources. Never, ever, 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 ever. And I know it to be true. And I know it to be true because I live in the future right now in the African Socialist Party as a obvious homosexual, with the most glitter in the twirls, and I'm treated like an African brother by everybody in this movement, by everybody in this party. And that is the future for African people, to be treated as humans and to come together as one people, not divided by, and it's not in this charity way of, oh, we're being nice to them because of this and da da da. No. We criticize each other, have self-criticisms, raise contradictions, all those kinds of things, but we come together as one African people, as comrades. And it is the future, and it is glorious and amazing, and the reason why we do this work. And if you want to be a part of that future, you have to want to be a part of that future, you have to come to this Congress. You have to go to apspcongress.org and sign up today, register today. We have daily administrations for $25, for as little as $25. You can do the whole week for $200 the whole week, and it gives you food, free transportation, and all of these kinds of things. And also the Black Power Masquerade Ball, $50. That's that Saturday, and it's going to be beautiful and amazing. And it's not just events. It's not just events. These are historical times and ways for us to participate in the revolution and to come out of this as a whole new African nation that is going to grab freedom by the belt and pull it forward and win this revolution. And I'm just so excited to be a part of it, and everybody else has to be a part of it. All these problems we are facing, African people, all of them, from those bills, from the domestic violence, from poverty, all those things can and will be ended, but you have to participate in this revolution. You have to go to APSP, congress.org, and participate and build and come to this Congress. And for all the white people watching, if you want an end to this and you want to take a stance of solidarity and rejoin the human society and not the oppressor and not somebody that's being, charitable or whatever like that or condescending. If you want to come in as human, the only way is through the African People's Socialist Party. The only way is through the African People's Solidarity Committee. The only way is through USM, because the relationship is defined by the oppressed. It's defined by the slave. And everything else you see from all the organizations of George Soros and everything else, and taking these race classes and all that other kind of stuff, those are relationships that are defined by the oppressor to have with the oppressed. Those are still parasitic relationships. Those are still parasitic organizations. This is where you have to come. You have to take a material stance of solidarity, and you won't see happier, more dedicated white people in the world that you will see here in APSC, in the USM, okay? If you want to talk about a cult and all this other kind of stuff, child, the cult is the white people that are killing themselves every day with drugs. That's the cult. The cult is those white people that sign up and put badges on and go into African communities and murder African children. That's the cult, okay? The cult is not joining the African Revolution and liberation. That's an end to the cult of capitalism, of imperialism that has murdered more people historically than any program, society, any system that has ever been known to the world, which is capitalism, okay? Capitalism. So come to the Congress, apspcongress.org, and make sure to pay reparations. Everybody that just paid reparations, I'm challenging you, pay another $10, just another $10. Come on, y'all. Let's continue to be the living embodiment of the end of imperialism and to show white power, just like Chairman said, mother sucker, you failed. Mother sucker, you failed. $10 to show you failed. Uhuru.
Secretary General Gazi Kodzo, thank you so much. Uhuru, what an honor.
Wow.
So powerful. This is our leadership.
This is our leadership. And we
Uhuru, I just want to say I'm doing another 10. I'm heeding the call from Secretary General Gazi Kodzo. I'm doing another $10. I encourage everybody else who's donated so far to do the same. Throw another 10 in.
And Jackson, I'll do another 10 as well. And I want to salute comrades who have taken the stance of white reparations to African people for African liberation. Raya Fogarty, $10. Uhuru. Raya. Ruby Giddleston, $25. Uhuru.
Ruby.
Yvette St. Ange, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, $25. Uhuru.
All right.
Valerie Bronte, $50.
Uhuru. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your support, your reparations to dual and contending power and self-determination for African people. And if you want to continue to help us reach this goal, which we know we're going to make tonight, you can do it at blackpowerblueprint.org. And we are going to move on tonight because we have another stellar guest tonight. We're going to have on momentarily, if I'm not mistaken. Comrade George, all the way from Perth, Australia, is one of the newest members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And we'll be speaking with them momentarily. I just need to get confirmation on that.
We need a minute.
We need a minute. Okay, so let's...
In the meantime, let's raise more reparations.
Yes.
Uhuru.
Yes,
I'll give another 10.
All right, Uhuru.
Appreciate Tamara Gadini, who's in our studio audience, a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement St. Pete, and volunteer with the Uhuru Foods and Pies as well. So I really want to appreciate Secretary General Ghazi Kodzo for that powerful presentation, for really laying it all out, what the Uhuru movement is, the significance of this, what reparations is, what stance that we can take as white people as part of the strategy for African liberation, which, as he laid out, will, create the liberation of all peoples and, can really just change things with this horrible system.
Yeah, everything.
So, Uhuru, I believe, Chairman Penny, you wanted to say something.
This is a very historic event, and I really want to salute Chairman Omali Shatella, who's created African internationalism that enables all people, including white people wherever we are, to begin to see the world as experienced by the African working class, and to come to the same conclusions that the African working class organized in the African People's Socialist Party comes to, that that white power has to go, that imperialism was built off of the enslavement of African people, off of the kind of colonialism that we see here in the United States that was the model for Australia, the model for what happened in South Africa, and any place else in the world. They have used the model of the slavery and genocide of the indigenous people and the enslavement of African people here. So I want to, really salute George. First of all, I want to say that, I haven't heard you speak yet, but I do want to say that I really appreciate your courage to be the first white person in Australia to begin to tell the truth, to violate the gentleman's agreement, the white ladies' agreement, that we're not supposed to talk about the truth, the reality, to find that, maybe some of the best friends that you thought you've had all your life are no longer your friends. Sometimes that happens for people in the white society, because this question of the reality of parasitic capitalism and life on the pedestal of the oppression of African and oppressed peoples, we're not supposed to talk about that. Right. We're supposed to live our happy life. We're supposed to be talking about our next holiday, vacation, our next night out for dinner, or if we don't quite make that, then we're talking about our alcoholism, our drug addiction, anything to escape the reality of what the system is. But I just want George to know that you're part of a movement now. You're part of a movement, and that here we have your back, and that this is a growing movement of white people all around the world. And I salute you for your courage to be speaking out there in Australia. It is very, very historic to be able to take the understandings of the African working class into another settler colony of Australia, where genocide and horrible colonial conditions and the theft of land and resources is going on, just as the model here in the United States. Uhuru. I think we're ready to move on.
Thank you, Chairwoman Penny Hess.
And I want to call on everybody. Oh, just really quick. We have Renee Nassar, $10. Frankie K, I think another $15. And we have $20 from Kristen Fortin, so we've raised $546. I do want to say that I will put in $50 tonight. BlackPowerBlueprint.org and pay reparations now.
We're over a third of the way there, and really want to appreciate everyone who has given so far, and salute George, Uhuru.
And I just want to include myself for $10 tonight toward the goal. I know it's... And to anyone else out there, whatever you can do, whether it's $500 or $10, $25, let's make it happen. BlackPowerBlueprint.org. And we're going to move now to an interview with Comrade George, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement member in Perth, Australia. Do we have contact with Comrade George? Excellent, excellent. Uhuru, and welcome, Comrade George. It's an honor to have you on the air tonight on the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's webinar. And could you tell us, first of all, about what it is like to be a white person in Australia, and tell us about being a white person in Australia, how that led you to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And if you could talk about the role of white people as the settler colonizers there and the people who perpetrated the terror and the genocide inflicted on the Aboriginal people.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Thank you, comrades. Firstly, I would just like to say that the Uhuru Solidarity Movement acknowledges that we're meeting and working on what always was and always will be the land of the Noongar people. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, as well as to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, as Indigenous sovereignty was never ceded. So thank you, Uhuru, and I really appreciated Ghazi's analysis of the relationship between the colonizers here. So I wanted to bring up a few just like kind of tangible points. I also can't see myself on Skype here, so sorry if I'm like, if the camera's off, let me know. But yeah, so the points that I wanted to kind of reinforce what Ghazi and the chairman have said is that like we've had the call for reparations like since we started colonization, pretty much. Like the resistance never stopped, but white people feel so entitled and proud of that entitlement here, and the fact that we got away with it kind of has like inflamed that in a way where sorry, there's so much information. I just want us to get to like the important parts. But for example, the way that Australia was advertised as like one nation rather than the hundreds that it was for 60,000 years of culture and practicing Aboriginal life. The British called this country Terra Nullius, which literally means no man's land. So when they brought prisoners here, the context was basically that Aboriginal people are flora and fauna and they are not humans, and that is something that manifests to today. Like it's despicable how much people don't know, but this just speaks to the level of erasure that imperialism wanted to achieve. Like you can look at the history of that so-called abolitionist era. The start of that committee was in 1787, and so Australia was born 1788. So it was just quite a convenient movement of labor, but like still stealing the resources. We have like the flora and fauna, like the history of laws that the curfews put on Indigenous people, the stolen generation, which was like a legislated ethnic cleansing of Australia and all Aboriginal. This is all something that's like a part of our culture, and we hear about it. We don't learn about it in school, or if we learn about Aboriginal people in school, it's like, oh, they did like, you know, they didn't live in modern society. They didn't live by our standards. So there's just like a cognitive awareness about how much we don't care, and we know on the international stage that that doesn't matter. But yeah, just to reiterate the point, like there are people in Parliament like today who have been employed for a long amount of time, who used to work in the police forces, who have histories of attacking Black children, of harassing them, of playing games, hunting them, like violent attacks, raping women, letting women die in prison, letting men and children die in prison. That's like one violent and very crucial element of the way that we act, despite the fact that we don't have gun laws. And supposedly that takes us from the center stage where America's like brutality is a bit more exposed. But if you live in the city, the relationship between Aboriginal people and white people is that they're vermin. They're treated like vermin. They're not treated like people at all. And the Indigenous communities are so disenfranchised. It's some of the worst poverty you'll ever see in the world. Like you can't actually understand it because it's so bad and nobody sees it. There are children with literally like bugs in their fucking ears and shit. And these indigenous communities, they don't have clean drinking water because of the uranium of the mines poisoning the water. They can't get vegetables subsidized, only meat because it can be preserved for longer. The relationship of even like leftist so-called spaces, which is just like the white left, because the theory is so computable here because the call for reparations has been around for so long. So that's how like I feel like it led me to the movement, was that if I knew that like I needed a movement that considered Aboriginal people to be sovereign to their own nation. So to answer that question, once I saw a few videos of Ghazi and the chairman and Ozanish Yeshtel, I was very like yeah, I didn't have to really question it. It was a very obvious answer. But to talk about, I wanted to read an excerpt of a book, if that's okay, just to show the audacious nature of the state and how like they knew that they were coming for minerals. They knew like they did use the format of how they exploited Africa to exploit Australia, but also to how to use the prison labor that they had available to them.
Comrade George, if you could read that, that would be fantastic, because I was about to ask you about the conditions of the Aboriginal people in Australia today and the similarities faced by African people inside the U.S. to what the so-called Aboriginal peoples face. So, I'm sorry, please.
Appreciate it, Uhuru. No, that there's so many elements where this can be seen if you know where to look. But for example, every person in the Northern Territory like youth detention is an Aboriginal child. So it's literally a prison full of black children. And that's the thing that like Northern Territory, if the documentary, one of the ones that I know Ghazi was talking about, Utopia, that talked about how they moved, like recolonized, like pushed people off their own communities after reclaiming their land. There's evidence of the Northern Territory incarceration issues there in that documentary. So that is a good one from 2012. Recommend it. But I have this book given to a comrade of mine from a Noongar elder, and it's about an island called Rock Nest. The book itself is about a similar to Shark Island, where it was essentially just a concentration camp for Indigenous people, but specifically for the leaders of all the resistance members. So all the Aboriginal men were brought there and enslaved to build the prison, and obviously a violent massacre was occurred there. Sorry if I'm like shaking a bit. There's just so much information that I want to share and I want to handle it well. That island today is known as Rock Nest Island, which is a tourist location, and the jail is like a hotel. Like people are told to go and stay there, and it's like one of this like Noongar country, but stolen. It's one of our biggest revenue making like tourist hotspots. So in this book, it talks about how the nature of the state has kind of allowed this to exist. And I wanted to bring attention to a particular story that is quite violent. So I do want to just give a forewarning about that. But to show you like how the state of like why Australians aren't the same prisoners they were, or like how we romanticized our history, or how much of a hidden dictatorship it is, as the chairman says. So it says, from the 1870s, the press in Perth began describing the appalling conditions under which pearl divers were working in the north, the WA Times and Perth Gazette discussed the incident at Shark Bay, where prisoners from Rottnest bound from the pearling grounds had jumped overboard, some disappearing and others drowning. By what law, the paper demanded, can government justify the shipping of native prisoners for private employment, which is in effect treating them as slaves? But colonists were not interested in the plight of divers. Having their own vested interests, and Magistrate Scholl in Roebourne saw it as not slavery but willing servitude. In 1871, within a few months of each other, Aboriginal labourers committed 2 gruesome murders in the Ashburton area, hardening many a white man's conscience and increasing the severity of treatment meted out to the Aboriginals. In each case, 2 were found guilty and executed in the Pilbara. Apologies, comrades. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm saying the right bit.
Comrade George, all the way from Perth, Australia, sharing some of the details of the colonial terror inflicted on the indigenous people, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia. Salute your stance, Comrade George. This is vital information you're getting out to the world right now. Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrades, I apologize. Sorry, I'm getting feedback.
I move to the next question? Or?
Oh no, I know the story. I just wanted to give the actual the words of the story rather than just reciting it off my mind. Essentially, the way that like Australia is famous for like having wealth and it's the lucky country and everyone can get a job here is through mining, and the way that that is allowed is through land title management, which I know a comrade who unfortunately I've lost the name of right now, in the history of St. Louis, talking about zoning and how the neo-colonial state sort of formed by saying, oh, we acknowledge that Black people exist and somehow that makes it okay now, but now like this is how gentrification starts. So sorry if I'm not being clear on that. The way that a certain mine was able to be built in this state of Western Australia was the land title or the mining title was granted by the state because they proved that no Indigenous people could have ties to the land, because there was evidence from a colonial record that you could, that the colonizers murdered an entire people, throwing them off a cliff, and used this as evidence to support that, well, you prove your ties to the land, so it's free country. It still goes back to the no man's land sort of agreement. And for Aboriginal people trying to reclaim their land, they have to prove in a colonizer's context what they have a connection to, which is unfair because they have an oral history and there's genocide and there's erasure and all these setbacks where basically they are actively denied control of their own community and their own right to self-determination. And that's been clear to them for so long, but white people here have really wanted to believe that the government maybe at some point has had their interests. And when people engage with politics, they want to use America as a comparative example. So with the erasure and the foreground and oversaturation, as Ghazi has put it, of African American, the violence that they've experienced, to sort of romanticize that narrative, white people here have been able to scapegoat their own responsibility of giving reparations.
And again, thank you so much for being on with us today, Comrade George. This is all just so critical for people to understand the interconnected nature of the struggle of indigenous people in Australia, the struggle of African people colonized domestically in the US, throughout the world. We wanted to ask you also, could you describe the political situation in Australia today and tell us about the government and its policies towards the Aboriginal people? I know you touched on that when you spoke about the requirement that the indigenous people show some sort of paper trail of their ties to the land. Could you speak more to any policies that the Australian government has towards the Aboriginal people?
Definitely, the flora and fauna policy, like the White Australia policy, was an act that the concern of that basically Aboriginals were a concern, and they had to be whitewashed away. So many children were forcibly removed from their parents. They don't know who their parents are. They don't have a connection to their families, which is obviously an experience that many African people can relate to. And yeah, the fact also that culture was so complex and so deep and vast, and there's so many different cultures. So to prove something after the stolen generation that included is like that's very recent as well. Like I had a high school teacher who was a stolen child, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not here to talk about her story, but I'm just saying that's how tangible the history is if you're willing to pay attention to it. But you can live without that. Like the socialized norm of not having morals but still having wealth has led us to this point, as the chairman states.
Uhuru. And you've spoken a bit about this, but could you state directly, why do you, as a white Australian, feel it is important to stand in solidarity with African and Indigenous people, not only in Australia, but inside the US and worldwide?
I understood it in a way that Australia has a relationship with, it's a very international neo-colonial kind of country that we pride ourselves that like we are literally Asia. We're like, no, we're we're the city of multiculturalism and tolerant. If you can see, every prime minister has basically said that we're like the most tolerant people, and the right and the left are pretty much the same government. Like they have very minor differences. It's not as extreme as the Democrat and Republican. Sometimes it is, but both parties had offshore processing for refugees, where people have just been dying in a prison in Nauru, like in Papua New Guinea. Like there has been that's been going on for so long. And so for me, understanding it is that, okay, the relationship that I have is not just as a white, my context is an international one, despite wanting sovereignty for Aboriginal people here. So how does that make sense? And the chairman made sense of that by saying that the capital was stolen from Africa, because capitalism is an issue we all have to deal with, and knowing that the struggle is united with the party made it easy, because everything about the movement here has been from a communist perspective of the right to self-determination and the right to the land. So to find a party that's talking about reparations in an international perspective, and that is educating white people and encouraging them to go back into their own communities, and yeah, I just appreciated that they were acknowledged as a people and that their struggle was validated through the movement. So, sorry, is that your question?
No, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, the question was why you as a white Australian stand in solidarity with African and indigenous people throughout the world. And you mentioned that you see yourself as an internationalist. And what I'm hearing is African internationalism growing in Australia through your stance as a member of the Uhuru Solidarity movement. And we're just so appreciative of that stance, that it's reached all the way across the world, that we're talking to you, transcending time zones. And we wanted to also ask you about the Day of Reparations to African People event that you plan to hold in Perth, Australia, and how people can get in touch with you if they're interested in coming out to this event or in helping to build the Uhuru Solidarity movement in Australia.
Uhuru, thank you. I appreciate all of this. Sorry, I wanted to finish off something about how white people do need to grow their own political consciousness and start understanding that by joining this movement, we are only bringing more power to Black liberation here in Australia, because they're so displaced by colonization and always under fighting that their fight is here. We need to bring more support in. So having the Black Power Blueprint here to support services that are already fighting for Black liberation is something that white. We're having the Days of Reparations from Australia, and we'll be paying reparations back to Africa and to the Black Power Blueprint to sort of solidify the stance that myself and many white Australians want to take, but just don't know how to. So you can get in contact with me, on my Instagram or my Facebook, which is Luna George Art.
Luna George Art?
Art.
Yeah.
Great. And you broke up just a little bit in the middle there, but did you put out the date that you're holding that? The Day of Reparations to African People?
I believe it's November 3rd.
Excellent.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Wow. Just so incredible to have you on. This has been an incredible night. I really want to express appreciation to you, Comrade George, for being here with us, for taking this stance in solidarity with the Indigenous people, the Aboriginal people of Australia, and with African people and Indigenous people worldwide. I wanted to give Chairwoman Penny Hess and Chair Jesse a chance if you have any questions yourselves.
Yes, well, I really want to salute George for the powerful stand that you're taking, that you're not just, talking as an individual, but have made the determination to become a white person, to stand in solidarity under the leadership of the African Revolution, of the organized African working class in the form of the African People's Socialist Party. And that is powerful. That is really courageous, and I salute you, and just all of the stands that you're taking. The question of building the Day of Reparations there in Perth, Australia, and to recognize, to really recognize the responsibility that we have as white people sitting on the pedestal of this oppression of everybody else on the planet Earth, and not just being separated from that, but that we ourselves have carried out, that the state power of imperialism, of the US, of Australia, couldn't function without us. We have played a role in the terror, in every despicable act that humans can do to another human being, as the chairman says, that is the core in which capitalism was built at the expense of everybody else. And to take this stand is powerful, and to see that all over the world, white people can be organized under the leadership of the African working class, because there's no other life for us. There's no other future for us because the majority of the planet Earth wants to bring this system down. And the extent to which white people are tied to this government, to this system, sucking the blood of the people on the planet Earth, we're going down with it. And that's why white people are so depressed and committing suicide here in the United States, dying in record numbers, because white people see no future if they're tied to imperialism. This is the future. This is the future in which African people are going to be free, and that the African Revolution represents the ability of there to be a world without war, without any forms of oppression. The African People's Socialist Party is committed to the end of the oppressors and the oppressed in all forms. That is the world that we can be part of if we carry out our strategy to go into the belly of the beast and win other North Americans. That this is the stand of reparations. This is the ability to turn loose our whiteness and to join humanity for the first time, because this relationship under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party gives us the ability to do that. I want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela for just the leadership that he has given to us, the faith and the brilliance of the chairman that has enabled us to be one. All the struggles that the chairman and the African People's Socialist Party has gone through over the years to win us to being able to embrace African internationalism as our own and recognize our responsibility as reparations. And I want to salute Deputy Chair Onasine Yeshitela, who is, as we say, the architect, the person carrying out the vision of Chairman Omali Yeshitela with this Black Power blueprint in St. Louis right now, and on so many other fronts of the African People's Socialist Party, which is building all over the world. And I want to salute Secretary General Ghazi, who just gave a brilliant presentation tonight and shows, you know, the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party as it is growing and building all over the world. And, you know, again, I want to salute you, George, for taking this on, for being the first white person in Australia to take a stand in solidarity under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, which is defining that there will be an end to colonialism everywhere. And when Africa is free, white power cannot continue to stand. That Africa itself and African people scattered all over this globe are key to imperialism being able to continue to suck the blood of everyone. When Africa is free, imperialism is over, and their days are numbered. I want to thank and salute others who have given reparations tonight. We have Connor Voss, $20. Robert Wood, $25.
All right.
Robert.
Evan Garner, $10. So we have raised $686 tonight. We only have $814 to go. We can do this. We can do this. For white people, we have the wealth, the social wealth inside of our bank accounts. Let's turn it over to the future of all humanity to recognize that what is happening with the Black Power Blueprint is a brilliant, brilliant strategy of the African People's Socialist Party for dual and contending power. It has, in this short period of time, very rapidly, in the impoverishment of the African colony of the north side of St. Louis, Missouri, has transformed that, has revitalized, has given hope to the population of African people there. And, you know, we see what it means for the African working class to have power in their own hands. They can and are everything for themselves. They do everything that is needed to be done. They don't need the state. It exposes the U.S. colonial state as an empty shell of nothing but repression. And that it is an exuberant experience that's going on in St. Louis right now. And, you know, I just feel that the presentation by Secretary General Ghazi just embodies that exuberance that we heard from him tonight, and that is coming. So we want to go ahead and raise these resources to say that, you know, we salute this comrade over in Australia
Yes.
taking a stand by herself right now, but we know that it's going to be a big movement there.
Yes.
And, you know, that we really salute you for just the tremendous leadership that you are giving to this struggle and to the growth of the party's strategy for the liberation of Africa and African people everywhere and for all oppressed and colonized peoples on this planet. And, you know, we want to call on other white people and everybody listening to this program tonight to go to powerblueprint.org. If you haven't gone there, you will see a lot of videos and pictures and other kinds of evidence of the work that is going on in St. Louis. You can find out a lot about it there and just see so much of the dynamism of this project for dual and contending power that is going on. But please go to blackpowerblueprint.org. We have raised $686. Let's bring it to $1,000 first.
Yes,
Yeah.
So we only have $324 to go.
That's doable.
To bring this to $1,000 tonight before we get to the $1,500 that we want to raise. So go to blackpowerblueprint.org. We can do this because we have the stolen social wealth that is passed down from generation to generation based on the enslavement of African people and the theft of their resources and the theft of this land from the indigenous people whose land this still is, as was acknowledged, you know, by the comrade in Australia. So I want to call on people to give the resources tonight. And, you know, if we have people who in the chat who have a question for George or any comments, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Somebody can give us that where we're watching it. But again, we want people to go to blackpowerblueprint.org. Go ahead, put in, we have $814. One person could do that. Just go ahead and put in the $814 tonight. Let's raise this resources.
Uhuru, George, Comrade George.
I'm returning, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll be returning $30 in stolen resources today as well.
Material solidarity. Wow, this has been such an incredible, series of interviews. Both, I just want to unite with everything you put out, Chairwoman Penny. It was an incredible interview with Secretary General Gazi Kodzo, with Comrade George, all the way in Perth, Australia. We want to thank you, comrades, so much. And now, as Chairwoman Penny has said, it's time to go to blackpowerblueprint.org and make this question of dual and contending power for the African working class in African hands a reality, both in St. Louis, here in St. Petersburg, and all the way in Australia. If you want to see Black Power on the ground in Australia, go to blackpowerblueprint.org and make that contribution.
We have $25 from Shahada. $25 from Shahada, so that puts us at $711 that we've raised so far.
Excellent. Uhuru.
So only
$200.
Uhuru. So only 200 minus 30 is 259 to 1,000. So again, anyone can just like put that in. We have access to the stolen resources. You know, being in the white community and the oppressor nation. You know, white people wherever we are in the world have benefited off of enslavement and genocide of African and indigenous peoples, and we have the responsibility to return their resources that are hoarded in our communities, hoarded in our bank accounts. So let's do this, Uhuru. And we have 10 more from Rose Latoul. Uhuru!
Uhuru! And George's $30. That puts $751
wow.
that we raised so far.
So
we
far.
need $249 more to get to $1,000 tonight, and $749 to get to $1,500. So let's do it. We can do this.
Absolutely.
We can do this.
Yes, we can.
Uhuru. So we want to, again, thank you to everyone who has donated already, and really want to echo what Chairwoman Penny and co-host Jackson Hollingsworth have said. Keep going to that site, keep making those, and spread the word, spread this video far and wide. I think this is a historical moment.
It is a historic moment.
Yeah, we really need to internalize the significance of this. And we've got a comrade all the way out in Australia who's gotten up at the beginning of their day.
Yeah.
Right?
Later.
6 a.m., 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And it all in order to say with, unflinching solidarity, her stance of reparations to the indigenous people, that we stand on stolen land. And I want to echo that. We stand on stolen land here in the U.S., here in St. Petersburg. We're literally standing on the graves of indigenous people, living in a country literally built on the bones of African people, enslaved, treated worse than animals, treated like chattel. When what Comrade George said about the policies that the Australian government had towards the Aboriginal people, a key part of that is what we recognize all over the world: dehumanization, treating the colonized as less than human, and this is their land. They are the rightful custodians of this land, and we see what kind of shape the land is in when it's in the hands of white power. So,
and we're the ones, that the white people are the ones that present ourselves as the rational ones, as the reasonable ones, as the nonviolent ones.
Ridiculous.
As the ones that are the true moral arbiters of, morality on this planet. And we're the ones that have committed crimes that are so hideous that, yes, it makes you throw up. It makes you sick at your stomach to see what we have done, and we have to take responsibility with that. The lynching, the burning, the rape, the murder, the slaughter, the little children that we have seized, and turning human beings into commodities for sale. This is our legacy. This is our legacy, and this is our history, and we have to take responsibility for it. We're not talking about guilt. We're saying that guilt's a legitimate emotion. It tells you what you did wrong and lets you change it, and that's what we want to do. But it's also about saying, if we want to join the people on the planet Earth, we have to dig in and take responsibility and pay our reparations. We can't just say, oh, well, let's all get along now. Let's just do this now. It doesn't work that way, and the U.S. is the one that makes people pay for, anything that they just define as a crime if they're colonized, and that we have to take responsibility for what we have done. And we want to say, okay, wow, it's really coming through. We have Diane Baptiste, $25. We have Harley Spurlock, $15. Janice Camp, $25
In
more.
addition,
Yes. And Casey Mackey, $100.
all right, Carla.
Wow. And Hutch, $25.
Right.
Wow. Kristen Fullerton, $100.
Let's go for 1,500.
We raised $1,042, only $459 to reach the $1,500. Let's keep doing this. Share, dig deep, and tell your friends, tell your families. Yes, in the next 8 minutes. Tell friends, family, hey, this movement is building all around the world for reparations. We have the chance to take responsibility as white people. This is a hopeful, beautiful thing, a historic moment, a historic webinar. Share this everywhere, and I really salute all of the comrades, all of the supporters who are giving to the Black Power Blueprint, building a liberated African economy for the liberation of African and all oppressed peoples around the world.
Wow, this is awesome.
I think a lot of people are understanding, as Secretary General Ghazi Kodzo has put out, reparations in large part is for us. It's for white people. It's an opportunity. It's a positive vision of the future. It's, as Chairwoman said, there is the question of guilt. There is the need for self-criticism.
But reparations are not punitive.
Exactly.
It's a positive stand that lets us rectify our relationship to everybody else on the planet. you know, and that gets us out of, it breaks our relationship with white power and lets us jump off this pedestal and be part of humanity for the first time. Not the policeman, not the colonizer, not the rapist, not the torturer, you know, that lets us be part of humanity by taking responsibility and going inside the belly of the beast and breaking that cycle of parasitic capitalism and turning those resources back over, not to an individual, but to the African Revolution, where everything has been stolen from Africa. And this is the opportunity to join humanity. And I just, again, really appreciate Comrade George just for your powerful stand, and hope, you know, can't wait, really looking forward to talking to you more and being there in Perth, and you coming, and you're coming to the Congress, right?
Yes.
You're coming to the Congress. And from what I've heard, it's a rumor.
It's not, it's confirmed.
It's confirmed.
Registered.
So we're going to meet you. We're going to meet
fact.
you in a couple weeks at the Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. The greatest, most significant event in the last 100 years that shows the rebirth of the African Revolution here and around the world. So that is really powerful. We're going to meet you really soon.
And in the Black Power Blueprint that this is raising resources for.
That's right.
A building built by the very project we're talking about.
So I'm going to make some announcements, and during that time, please continue to share, dig deep, go to blackpowerblueprint.org. And of course, the first announcement that cannot be said enough is the African People's Socialist Party's 7th Congress, Vanguard, the Advanced Detachment of the African Revolution. That is this October 6th through the 12th in St. Louis, Missouri. And the week-long and the first 2 days will be in a different venue, and then the next days after that will be in Aquaba Hall, means welcome in Tweed, in the beautiful Uhuru House Community Center of the Black Power Blueprint. You will see the Black Power Blueprint, touch the Black Power Blueprint. It is amazing, what the African Revolution is doing. And so you can register at apspcongress.org. APSP for African People's Socialist Party. Again, that's apspcongress.org. It's not too late. Book your registration, book your ticket, and see you there. All of us and George will be there, and so exciting to be in solidarity with African liberation. And then right after the Congress, we go into the International Days of Reparations to African People, the biggest campaign of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, where Chairman Omali Yeshitela and leaders of the African People's Socialist Party go on tour and speak to, and Chairwoman Penny of the African People's Solidarity Committee, honored to have you on the tour, and Chair Jesse of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement will be speaking to white communities all over the country. And we are having also an event in Perth, Australia, and you can the first date is in St. Louis, Missouri, October 17th, and it goes, all throughout the world until November 14th. So check uhurusolidarity.org. Again, that's uhurusolidarity.org to see where it is near you. And also visit the Facebook page, facebook.com/uhurusolidarity. And we have an anonymous donation of $50.
Okay. We only need $409 more, so you can go there anytime tonight. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org. Go ahead and put in $409. Let's get up to the $1,500. It's really a powerful stand. Reparations, a positive stand that white people can take to be part of the future of humanity. Uhuru.
Uhuru. And tune in for our next webinar next Tuesday. I'm sorry, go ahead, George. Uhuru.
No, I was just saying Uhuru, so I was lagging.
Uhuru. And then the next webinar of the Black Power Blueprint fundraising campaign is next Tuesday, September 18th, 7 p.m. Eastern. It is Black Power and Chicano Power, and it will be with of course, Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, and also Union and Gazi Kodzo, is that correct?
Yes.
Uhuru.
No, Akile Anai.
And Director Akile Anai of the African People's Socialist Party, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the party, and also Benjamin Prado of Unión del Barrio,
Yes.
with whom the indigenous Mexican Liberation Organization that is headquartered in San Diego, California, and the Uhuru movement and Unión del Barrio have had an over 30-year-long relationship, working very closely. You know, the African People's Socialist Party acknowledges that this is their land that we are on in the U.S. And Mexico, and really salute that organization for fighting for indigenous and Mexican liberation. And that is a powerful webinar we'll be having again September 18th. Tune in at youtube.com/blackpowerblueprint or facebook.com/blackpowerblueprint, and see you there. And let's raise the rest of this $1,500 tonight. Uhuru!
Uhuru! Unity!
Thank you, George. Thank you.
Uhuru,
Coming
George.
on.
Uhuru, George.
It's an
I'll
honor.
see you really soon.
Uhuru, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uhuru.
All right, comrades. Unity through
Reparations! Uhuru!
Outstanding. Thanks to everyone.